Many of us want to clean and condition our leather bags, but there are so many leather cleaners and conditioners on the market. How do you know which one is the best to use? When we seek advice from YouTubers or from people in Facebook groups, what we find is that people swear by particular products. Leather CPR is the best, Cadillac is the best, Bic 4 is the best. Well, how do we know who to believe? And how do we know that those people know what they're talking about? There are some videos that show before and after cleaning with these different products, and there are some videos that show comparisons between several different leather cleaners and conditioners. However, none of the videos, at least that I have seen, compare all of the leather cleaners and conditioners, and very few talk about these products in relation to handbags. And when we're talking about handbags versus shoes or car upholstery or other kinds of leather uses, there are different things we need to know about these cleaners and conditioners when it comes to handbags. So today I will be comparing 15 leather cleaners and conditioners that are very popular for use on handbags. I'll be testing them on vachetta leather, and I'll discuss several different points about how these leather cleaners and conditioners would affect our handbags. In the end, I will give you my top recommendations, and I will tell you how to access the comprehensive guide that I've put together, comparing each of these 15 products so that you can have it at your fingertips next time you need to clean a bag. I will have that document available at my website, autumnbeckman.com, and it will be linked below. Before we jump in, welcome. I'm Autumn Beckman, and I am here to help you live your most luxurious life within your budget. I post new videos on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of those, and you won't want to miss my daily community posts, where I post the best sales of the day and all the fabulous handbags that I find. You'll also want to check out my website, autumnbeckman.com. It will be linked below, and that's where I have handbags and other accessories for sale, as well as the My Handbag Collection Organizer, which I designed to help you organize and curate a purposeful collection of your most treasured items. This is the front and back of the item tracker page, which is the heart of this organizer, and this is where you can record all the information you'd want to know about your handbags and small goods. Now let's take a peek at the 15 leather products I'm comparing today. Apple brand leather care. I got all of these from Amazon. This one was $8 for 4 ounces, which comes out to $2 an ounce. Bic 4, which was $6.50. That's 2 ounces. That comes out to $3.25 per ounce. BlackRock Leather and Rich. That was $7.50 for 4 ounces. Comes out to $1.88 an ounce. Cadillac Leather Lotion. That was $9 for 8 ounces, which is $1.12 per ounce. Chamberlain's Leather Milk Healing Balm, which comes with a little sponge. That was $20 for 4 ounces. That comes out to $4.99 an ounce. That's one of the more expensive ones. Fibing's Saddle Soap. This is the yellow soap. It's $10 for a 12-ounce can. That's 83 cents per ounce. Leather CPR, it's a leather and conditioner, $26 for 18 ounces, comes out to $1.44 an ounce, but I've heard people have found it a lot cheaper at one of the dollar stores, like Family Dollar maybe, I forget which one. Leather Honey leather conditioner, this was $17 for 8 ounces, comes out to $2.12 an ounce. Leather Therapy Restorer and Conditioner, this was $12 for 8 ounces, comes out to $1.51 an ounce. Lexol's All-in-One Formula, this was $11 for 16.9 ounces, it comes out to 64 cents an ounce. This was the cheapest of all of them. Obanoff's Heavy Duty Leather Preservative, this was $21 for 8 ounces, that comes out to $2.62 an ounce. Patina Leather Conditioner, this is from Portland Leather Goods, it's $32 for 8 ounces, that comes out to $4 an ounce. Saphir or Sapphire Renovator, $15 for 1.69 ounces. That comes out to $8.99 an ounce. This was by far the most expensive product per ounce. Skidmore's Leather Cream, this was $25 for 6 ounces. That comes out to $4.16 an ounce. And Venetian Imperial Leather Balm, this was $14 for 4 ounces. That comes out to $3.49 per ounce. Before we start the comparison, I'll give you the parameters of what we're doing. I'm testing each of these 15 products on vachetta leather. I picked up this leather in 2 sheets from Amazon and I cut it into 3-inch squares. So I have 16 squares total. That's 1 for each of the 15 products plus 1 control that I won't use any products on. On each square, I've used a ballpoint pen to divide the square into 3 sections sections, because on each of the squares I will do 1, 2, and 3 coats to see if that makes a difference. I've seen some videos comparing some of these leather products, and some of them have used coasters as their test leather. I have found that some coasters can be coated with a plasticky material. That's why I ordered a vachetta. This would be vegetable tanned and hopefully not have a coating on it. There are, however, 2 limitations that I've noticed for using this brand new vachetta. One is that since the leather is new, it's clean, so we can't test the cleaning properties. It's also not dry, so we can't test the conditioning properties of these products. The second limitation is that since there is no color, there's no dye on these vachetta pieces, we can't test how these products might affect leather that does have dye. So whether it would lift any of that dye and you might lose color. But there are a few things that we will be able to test with this leather, and for the comparison we will look at price, which I already gave you, the claims that the product makes, the consistency of the product, so is it very thin and runny or is it thick like a paste, the absorbency, so how well does the leather absorb the product, and then once all 3 coats are dry, we'll be able to see the effect on whether the product might darken the leather and what kind of finish the product leaves on the leather. Is it matte or does it leave a very glossy finish? And finally, I'll spray each of the leather pieces with a little water to get an idea of how well it might repel water. So let's get started. The first thing we'll examine for these 15 products is the consistency. This isn't a test, it's just informational. Some are very liquidy, some are lotions, some are creams, some are balms, some are more like paste. So what I'll do is go through each one in alphabetical order, starting with the Apple brand leather care. And I will put some of the product on this clear knife here so you can see the consistency, and then I'll put it on each piece of paper. And that may also give you an idea, a little bit, of the absorbency, where I expect some products will just sit on top of the paper, whereas others will spread out and be absorbed by the paper. So starting with Apple Care, it's pretty liquidy, but it stays on the knife well. And I'll just tap that down on the paper. Bickmore's Bic 4 Leather Conditioner is up next, and this looks like a very similar consistency to Apple. This can also give you an idea of the colors. I think most of these are going to be pretty clear, but some will have more of a color to them. This Black Rock looks more like a gel. You can see that has quite a bit more color, and it's thicker than those first 2. Next up is Cadillac. This is the only one that I have used before. It looks a lot like those first 2, liquidy and pretty clear. So I'm going into this very unbiased. I don't have any favorites. Next is Chamberlain's Leather Milk Healing Balm. This is more of an opaque white and definitely more of a paste. There we go. Very thick. That's the thickest so far. You can see it really stands up on its own there. Next is Fibing's Saddle Soap, and this is the yellow soap. They also have a black soap and a white soap. This is similar to that leather balm. It's kind of a paste, and that's definitely going to stand up on its own. Next is Leather CPR. In recent years, I've seen people talk a lot about this. A lot of people swear by this one. The consistency here is just like the first 2. Whoops, goes over here. Next is Leather Honey. And while I'm opening this, one of the things I forgot to say earlier is that I mentioned the price and the price per ounce. But the consistency and the instructions, this is very clear and very liquid. That's the most liquidy one I've seen, I think. And the most clear one. There's no color at all there. Next is Leather Therapy Restorer and Conditioner. So I was saying that the consistency of these and the instructions, which tell you sometimes to apply liberally or sometimes to apply sparingly, that will have an effect on how long the container of your product will last. So the price per ounce is not the only thing to consider when you're thinking about value for your money. Oops, I'm spilling that everywhere. Well, we can see it's very liquidy and it's very yellow. Next up is Lexol, and I have to take back what I just said about Leather Honey because this is absolutely the thinnest. This is, I can't even get the bottle on the screen to tip it over because it's just so liquidy. It's like water, and it's kind of soapy. You're supposed to shake most of these bottles really well before you apply them, and this one got sudsy when I did that. Next is Obanoff's Heavy Duty Leather Preservative. This one has some beeswax in it, and it is the most pasty, I'd say, and the most waxy so far. Definitely will stand up on its own, but it still feels like it has a lot of oil in it too, whereas the Fibing saddle soap is more dry, but you're supposed to add water to that. You're supposed to apply it with a damp cloth when you use it. Next up is Patina Leather Conditioner. This one's from Portland Leather Goods. And this is another one that is pretty thin and has a little bit of a creamy color to it, kind of like the first couple. I'm going to call this Saphir, even though it may be pronounced Sapphire. It's a French product, and it's their Renovateur. The instructions are not super clear on this, but this was the most expensive one. Ooh, it's very creamy. And this may not be for like daily, not daily use, but regular use. It may be more for specialized use, like extra dry leather, but I'm not really sure because the instructions weren't great. So this is the closest to what I would say would be a lotion that you would put on yourself in terms of consistency, and it has that nice creamy color too. Next is Skidmore's Leather Cream. This is definitely more of a cream too, as it says. There you go. Has a little bit of a brown color. Scoot that back over. And lastly, Venetian Imperial Leather Balm. As you can see, it's very white and it's pretty thin, but not as thin as some of the others. So there is a peek at each one of the products. It's kind of fun to see them all laid out like that. Now let's actually put them on the leather. I'm now ready to apply the first coat of each of these leather cleaning products to each of the squares of the vachetta leather. Again, I'll be doing 3 coats total, 1 coat here, 2 coats here, 3 coats here. So I'll start by applying the product to the entire thing. I will say that each product has its own instructions, so whatever product you get, make sure that you are following those instructions. Some of them call for liberal application of the product, while others call to use the product sparingly. Some say to use it on a cloth, like a cotton cloth in particular. Some say to use it on a sponge. What I am going to do, just for the sake of consistency for all of them, is to use a paper towel. Some of them say to use your fingers even. You may want to wear gloves while doing some of these. You might want to read the ingredients lists. I'm going to have a document available for you at the end of this video that has all the instructions for each of the 15 products, so you can read them and be aware of them before you buy anything. That was Apple brand. Next is Bic 4. Some of the products call for you to let the product dry for a certain amount of time, and some want you to buff the product after it's dried or after a certain amount of time. So you'll want to be aware of that as well and follow those instructions. I just set my computer up over here next to me so I can have all of those instructions in one place as I'm doing this, and set timers as needed. As you can see, they darken the leather as you apply them, but the apple is almost dried completely, and it lightens once it dries. Next is Black Rock. This is one that says to use sparingly, so I'll start with a very small amount. Yeah, that goes a long way. It feels like it kind of sits on the surface. It maybe doesn't absorb as well as the first few. Yeah, I've got too much on now. I need to pull some of that back off with the paper towel. So that's an example of one that might last longer than you think because you use so little of it at a time. Next is Cadillac. This one, on the other hand, says to use liberally. So I'll get that on there. That doesn't make the leather as dark as the other ones did, at least not at first. I think I need a little more. You can see there's some color variation, although it's drying and already lessening. So there's a little more to try to even that out. Next is Chamberlain's Leather Milk, which comes with a sponge in the box. However, I'm going to stick with the paper towels. This says to apply thinly, so we'll see how that goes on. Darkens it quite a bit at first, and it doesn't go very far before you need to add more to your applicator. Okay, there we go. Got that one finished. It's one of the darker ones I've seen so far. Let's see how that dries. Next up is Fibing Saddle Soap. This one says to use a damp cloth, so I've dampened the paper towel, and to work up a lather, because it is a soap. And it comes out pretty thick on the paper towel there. So some of these will tell you on the product container that they are likely to darken your leather, even once they've dried. And others will tell you that it won't darken leather. So that's one of the things that we want to check in this video. And a lot of them make different claims, and I was going to read all of those claims to you in this video. However, that would take a very long time. It would make the video much longer. So what I'll do instead is I'll have it in that document that you can access at the end. Leather CPR is up next. Some of the products will tell you that they are specifically for drier leathers and that they're for restoration of dry leathers. particularly some of the balms and thicker products. I think that none of these products are to be used on suede. Some of them say that specifically. They say do not use on suede, nubuck, and some other kinds of leathers. Some of them can be used for exotics. Again, all this will be in the document that I made for you at the end. And I'm going to scoot all of these up a bit so you can see the bottom rows better. Next is Leather Honey, very clear. Leather CPR, by the way, the one that we just did before this. Oh gosh, that doesn't go very far. It says to use a sponge and not a cloth because the cloth will absorb all of the leather CPR. So again, just make sure you're reading those instructions. And this one is super absorbent in the leather. I feel like you would need a lot of this if you had really dry leather. It's funny, on the Leather Honey, on the instructions, it says a little goes a long way. I found the opposite to be true. Next is Leather Therapy for Store and Conditioner. You'd also want to be aware that some of these products have wax in them and some don't, and some have oils and some don't. And you may have a preference, whether it's a personal preference or something to do with your leather, where you may or may not want some of those products. Some of the products specifically say no wax, so that must be a thing. Oh, I also wanted to mention that Coach makes their own leather cleaner and conditioner, but I didn't get those because I haven't heard good things about them, so I didn't want to waste any time or money with that. That Leather Therapy feels a little sticky on my fingers. Next is Lexol. To be a little extra careful with this one because it is so liquidy. Whoops, great. Just dropped it on one of the other ones. Hold on. So we'll just have to keep that in mind. That's the Skidmore's. It's got some drops of Lexol. All right. The Lexol has suds in it. Not sure if you can see that in the light, but I'm not liking that. It's soapy. That's the one that I said earlier when I shook it up. It was sudsy. Next is Obanoff's Heavy Duty Leather Preservative. This one says to use it every 6 to 8 weeks on your leather, and I'm not sure any of us clean our bags that often. Keep in mind too that in the instructions for each of these products, some of them also tell you to wipe off the excess after it's dry or within a certain amount of time, or to buff it after a certain amount of time or when it's dry. I may have already mentioned that, but it's an important note to make. So you wouldn't just put the product on and leave it. You'll want to wipe it off and buff it afterward. Now I'm going to move this top row out of the way and pull all these up another row so that you can see the bottom row better. Next is Patina. This one's from Portland Leather Goods. I opened the bottle and some of it squirted onto the Skidmore's, so the poor Skidmore's square is getting all kinds of other things on it. Okay, the patina says to use with a damp cloth, so I got this damp. And it says to do it in a circular motion. I'm not sure how much that really matters, but okay. There we go. Next is the Saphir Renovateur. Get some of that and brush that on. A little bit more. I keep thinking this is thicker than it is, so I'm kind of spilling it everywhere. Be aware of that. Also, that Saphir comes with a little cloth to use, but again, I'm sticking with paper towels. Next is Skidmore's Leather Cream. Okay, get a little bit of that. The poor Skidmore's square. All right, well, you can see the spotting from the previous accidents, but it is what it is. And the Venetian Leather Balm. It's pretty absorbent. Need a little more. That's not darkening the leather very much, and it seems to dry pretty quickly. It has been about 2 hours since I put the last coat on this one. Now, once these are completely dry and not tacky anymore, I'm going to go ahead and put the second coat and then let everything dry again and then put the third coat. But I'm not going to film that part because it's just boring. So I'll be back once all 3 coats are on here and dry. Here are all 15 of the leather samples now. Each one has 3 coats of the product, and they're dry at this point, plus the control. Some of them feel tacky, especially the Black Rock. It tends to be the ones that are the darkest that feel most tacky. And I've been going over information from each of the brand's websites, and several of them have said that if the leather feels tacky after using the product, that means you've put too much of it on, so to wipe it off and then buff it. So I'm gonna go ahead and buff all of these now. To do that, I'm just taking a microfiber cloth and I'll rub over the leather in circular motions. I won't film all of this because that's boring. I just buffed buffed the black rocks with this cloth. It was very difficult to do because it's so tacky, and it is less tacky now, I have to say, but it was so tacky that the cloth was sticking to it. And you can see that some of that product definitely came off on here. There's some discoloration to the rag. But it makes me wonder about the absorbency of black rock, because so many of the other products went right into the leather, and I feel like I didn't use too much of it, but it makes me wonder if it just sits on top instead of really being absorbed. But what I'm going to do now is use this little horsehair brush. It's from Coach, but I picked it up. I picked a few of them up actually, Preloved. But you don't obviously need a Coach one. You can get any horsehair brush. I'll have some linked in the description box. And for that, you would just rub in circular motions. Now that I've done that, I would say that that definitely lifted some of the product off, but it is still tacky. I do feel like it lightened the color too, because it was pretty dark before. Now here they are all buffed. You can definitely tell that some are lighter than others, some are darker. Some you can see a variation in darkness based on how many coats it has. So now I'll divide this into a couple of groups on which remained the lightest and which got darker compared to the control. Here are the ones that remained the lightest. You can see that everything darkened a little bit compared to the control, but these were consistently the lightest across all three coats. Those were Apple, Bic 4, Leather CPR, Patina, Venetian, Cadillac, and Lexol. And these are the ones that consistently were darker. The controls in the center, and some of them you'll notice were very light with just one coat, but they got darker as more coats were added. And some were significantly darker with just one coat. These are Blackrock, Chamberlain's, Fibings, Leather Honey, Leather Therapy, Obanoff's, Saphir, and Skidmore. I also noticed that a few of these left streaks or different textured looks. The Beckman was the worst for this, as you can see. Fibings also left some streaks. This is the Saddle Soap. Skidmore, you can see those marks, like the watermarks, but remember that's because I spilled some other leather conditioners on them by accident. I would also note that Leather CPR from the first category that didn't darken the leather, even it had a little bit of streakiness, barely noticeable, but still worth noting here. If you're looking to darken leather, sometimes people want to do that. I'd say Leather Honey did the best job of that. You can see a big difference between the first, second, and third coats. That would allow you to darken your leather pretty quickly. Another thing to consider about the finished product here is the shine or the luster that the product leaves on the leather. I don't know how well that will show in the video. However, I can tell you that Saphir leaves definitely the shiniest, noticeably by far of any of them. I wouldn't say it's a high gloss, but more of a luster or a maybe semi-gloss. I'd say the next two are Venetian. It's a little hard to tell with the light in here, so you kind of have to trust me that I'm using my eyes and giving you the correct information. Venetian has a slight luster to it, and also Leather Therapy here has a slight luster to it. I'd say next is Patina, but it barely has a luster. It's just slightly more noticeable than any of the others that we haven't talked about yet. Lexol perhaps has a very mild luster. Also notice those marks that it left after I buffed it. Cadillac perhaps has a very, very mild luster. Otherwise though, I'd say the rest are pretty matte. Hopefully you can see that somewhat at this angle. Another thing you'll have to trust me on, because it won't come across in a video, is I did a smell test on each of these. I smelled them straight from the containers, but I also smelled them on the leather once it was dry and buffed. And I will say that smelling them on the leather, it's pretty much non-existent for all of them. You have to get right up to them and really take a big whiff to smell anything. Most of them smell just like vachetta. Out of the bottle, however, so this would be something you might want to consider while you're actually working with the product or being in an enclosed room. This Obanoff's Heavy Duty LP by far has my favorite scent. To me, it smells like a beeswax or a honey. And while I was letting the leather dry, I would leave the room and have the door closed, and when I came back in, the room smelled of this, which was really nice. I think this would make a nice candle if somebody could get that scent in a candle. And overall, most of the products had a very light smell that wasn't very noticeable, but there were a few that had a stronger smell that to me is more like a chemical smell that I did not like. So I'll share what those are. Those were Blackrock, Leather Therapy, Lexol, which I noted did leave a very, very mild scent on the leather, Saphir, which again left a very mild scent, and Skidmore's. I will have more detailed information about the scents of each of these products in the document I created for you that you can access at the end of the video. Also included is some information about the ingredients, and I would note that while I was doing research on those ingredients, some of them didn't tell you what was in them, but a couple of them said specifically that they used nut oils, which some people could be allergic to. Now I'll show you each of these individually next to the control. Here's the Apple brand leather conditioner. Here is Bic 4. Here is the BlackRock Leather Enrich. Here is the Cadillac Leather Lotion. Here is the Chamberlain's Leather Milk Healing Balm. Here's the Fibings Yellow Saddle Soap. Here is Leather CPR. Here is Leather Honey's Leather Conditioner. Here is Leather Therapy's Restorer and Conditioner. Here is Lexol's All Leather Quick Care. Here is Obanoff's Heavy Duty Leather Preservative. Here is Patina's Ultimate Leather Conditioner. Here is Saphir's Renovateur. Here is Skidmore's Leather Cream. And here is Venetian Imperial Leather Balm. Now the last thing we'll test on these squares is the water absorbency. Some of the products do claim to be water repellent, but not all of them. So what I'll do is sprinkle some water on the bottom of each of the squares, including the control this time. And we'll look at two things. First, does the leather absorb the water right away, or does it bead on top of it? And then I'll let the water dry and see if it left spots. First for Apple. Apple seems to be beading on top. Next for Bic, that also is beading on top. And then for BlackRock, also beaded. Actually, I take that back. It looks to be absorbing into the leather. You see how dark that is compared to the other two. And Apple looks like it's starting to absorb on the one coat. That's something I should do, is make sure that I have water on each of the three places. Let's go over to the BlackRock and look what that's doing. Of those three, Bic 4 looks the best. Now here's Cadillac. It's beading at first. Chamberlain's, also beading. Fibings, that seems to be absorbing more on the one coat end. Leather CPR, beading so far. Leather Honey, Leather Therapy. Well, that one is absorbing right away. Lexol, that one looked pretty absorbent. Obanoff's, that looks like it's sitting on top. Patina, ooh, absorbent. Saphir, Skidmore's, and lastly, Venetian. And I forgot about the control. That should be very absorbent. Here's how they all look after waiting only about 1 minute for this to dry. You can see most of them look like they've absorbed the water, but there are two clear standouts. Chamberlain's absolutely looks the most water repellent, and Obanoff's with 2 or 3 coats, not with 1 coat. These are the only 2 of these 15 that have places where the water has only beaded and not absorbed. I would also note that some of these brands have other products that are specific to water repellency. And now I'm back 2 hours later to see how this water spots dried. First, let's check the control. We can see that there are spots visible there. They've darkened. I would say the spots that are most visible are on Leather Therapy. And for some reason, these spots are lighter than the rest of the leather. I don't know the science behind that. Do any of you? But those are the most visible to me, so Leather Therapy, to me, based on this test, would be the worst as far as waterproofing. I think the control did even better than that. The best one I thought was going to be Chamberlain's, but I think it's actually Apple. I don't see any spotting at all on the Apple. With Chamberlain's, there's barely any spotting, but you can see a little bit here and there, like on that bottom corner over here, but almost no spotting. Cadillac also did really well. You can just barely see a little bit of spotting there. Bic 4 did really well. With Leather CPR, I do see some spotting and some ring marks on the edges of the water. Lexol has a little bit of spotting. Leather Honey, you can see some spotting. Patina, you can see a little bit of spotting. Venetian did fairly well. You can see some spotting. And I would say the rest of the ones I didn't mention yet, the spotting is more visible on. But I'll have more information about this in that downloadable document. Now I was just stacking each of these up to move on to the end of the video, and I noticed that some of them were damp on the back. I hadn't thought until now to show you the back of the leather, and you can see that on some of them, the products or the water at the end have seeped through to the back of the leather. There's the Control. Apple looks good. Bic 4 looks good. Black Rock looks pretty good. Cadillac looks good. Chamberlain's looks like it has the product that seeped through and the water. This would be the side with the 3 coats. Fibings looks pretty good. Leather CPR looks pretty good, other than a spot at the bottom. Leather Honey seems to have seeped through the most. Remember, that product was very absorbent in the leather. I had to put a lot on there to get coverage. Leather Therapy looks pretty good, although it is a little darker on the 3-coat side. Lexol looks pretty good. Obanoff's definitely seeped through on the 3-coat side, and it looks like there's some water spotting coming through as well. Patina looks great. Saphir looks like it got some water spots that came through. Skidmore definitely had water spots come through, and Venetian had a few water spots also. It is important to note whether those products or the water goes all the way through the leather, because if you have a bag that is lined and it gets wet, or you add product and it's wet on the back of the leather, it will be difficult for that to dry all the way through, and it would take more time than some other products, so that could potentially cause problems. As you saw, some products are better at some things than other products. So if you're looking for something in particular, you might want to go with one of those. But the big question is, overall, across everything we looked at, which leather cleaners or conditioners worked the best? Now, some of that will depend on what you're looking at, and some of it will depend on what's most important to you. What I did was take each of the categories where I felt like there was a better or worse that could be compared, and I broke that into sections and gave each of those scores. I did that for each of the leather products, so there's a more objective way to figure out where each of those ranks against each other. But before we get to that, for me, there was a very clear loser, a product that I would never use again, and there were a few very clear winners. The product that I would never use again is Lexol. Now let's keep in mind with this product that I chose the all-in-one formula. They do have other products, including a duo where one is a cleaner and one's a conditioner. Maybe those would test better. But for me, there were 2 things that made me never want to use this again. One was the consistency. It is just like water. It is by far the most liquid of all of these products, and because of that, you don't have much control at all over where it goes or how much you're using. The other thing that I hated, yes, I will say that, hated, is that it had suds. I didn't like seeing that, and I especially did not like that on the leather. The only other product that really stands out to me as one I would probably never use again, but I say that with some hesitancy because I know some of you out there use this product and swear by it, and I feel like maybe it's just for particular purposes and not an all-purpose product like a lot of the ones we looked at. That is Black Rock. You guys saw the consistency of this. It's kind of like a gel. You saw the trouble with it, you saw how it darkens the leather, how it leaves streaks, how it was tacky. And I will say, now that I have buffed it and used the horsehair brush and it's dried even longer, it's not tacky anymore. But there were other products that were never tacky. So this just took a lot of extra work, and I don't like the way the leather looks now that it's done, so I'd be very unlikely to use Black Rock again. Another I'd be unlikely to use again is Leather Therapy. This company does offer many different products. I use the Restore and Conditioner. Most of their products, by the way, are geared toward equestrian uses, but I just don't like what it did to the leather when I did the water spotting test. It's had a few more hours to dry and it still looks like this. So personally, I wouldn't want to risk that happening to one of my handbags. So those are the ones I would steer clear from personally. But which ones would I gravitate towards? Which ones do I think did the best overall? Well, for me, as I was working with them, there was one that stood out that was most impressive. But now that they're all completely dry, there are 4. The one that stood out to me most was the Apple brand leather conditioner. The other 3 that I feel like they tied with Apple in the end are Bickmore's Bic 4 leather conditioner, Cadillac boot and shoe leather lotion, and I was really surprised by this last one, the Patina Ultimate Leather Conditioner from Portland Leather Goods. Why was I surprised by this? I think just because it comes from a company that specializes in handbags and not from a company that specializes in making products to clean them. Taking an educated guess with what I know about Portland leather goods, this product would have been sourced out, not developed in-house. But I could be wrong. But I was very impressed with it. Cadillac I was a little surprised by because I've used it before and I don't remember being impressed with it, but once I compared it to all these other products, it did really well. Big Four did not surprise me because I've heard lots of great things about it. The Apple brand product surprised me a little bit, only because I used to hear a ton of great things about it. Everybody used Apple a few years back. But these days I hear more about other products, so I felt like people had moved away from Apple. Maybe we should rethink that, folks. So those are my overall thoughts, but now let's look at the objective, or at least as objective as I could make them, scores for each of these and how they tallied up in relation to each other. Based on my scoring method, a product could rank as high as 20 points. Coming in first place with 18 points, this won't be a surprise, Apple brand leather conditioner. Tying for second place with 16 points are Big Four and Patina. In third place is Cadillac. So my top 4 choices did align with the ranking system. But now is where things get trickier. There was a 3-way tie for the next ranking with 13 points. And these were Venetian Leather Balm, Leather CPR, and Lexol. Now Venetian didn't surprise me. I figured this one would fall somewhere in the middle. Lexol surprised me because it's one I would never use again, but this is an example of how weighting certain categories, depending on their importance to you, can really affect the score. So for me, the consistency and the suds were a deal breaker despite how well it actually did perform on the leather. Some of you may not mind the consistency or the suds. Personal preference. I was a little surprised that leather CPR was in the middle here, or slightly above the middle if you're looking at the 20-point score range. And I was surprised because this is the product that seems to be the most popular with the most people right now. Most of the time when I see people talking about cleaning and conditioning products, it's in the vintage Coach groups on Facebook. People in Louis Vuitton groups also talk about it in terms of cleaning or protecting vachetta. But lately, most of what I've seen is about vintage Coach, and it seems like everyone uses leather CPR. It scored really high in a lot of things, but for me, the water spotting, it left little rings around it. There were just other products that outperformed it. 2 products tied with 11 points. Those were Fibing's Saddle Soap and Saphir Renovateur. Now, if I needed to clean leather, and since I already have this, I would certainly try the saddle soap for that. Otherwise, those top 4 products that I mentioned earlier, I'd go with them first. The Saphir, you may remember, was the most expensive per ounce. It was $8.99. I think that was double any of the other products. When you open it and you look at this cream inside, it's very luscious and luxurious looking and feeling. But I didn't find that it performed as well as many of the products that were half the price and less. This does say on the box that it's specific for fine, smooth leather and for box calf, but I really think those top 4 products would work just as well, and you don't need to spend this much money. Next with 10 points is Obenauf's. I think this one smelled the best. However, I'm not sure I'd use it again because of the thickness and consistency. And this one and the rest of these that I'll show you in the rankings are all the ones that darkened the leather the most. But I also think this may be for particular uses, again, not kind of an everyday conditioner. So I would keep that in mind. Like maybe it's for leathers that are extra dry. The same thing would be true for the next product with 9 points, and that is Chamberlain's. I think healing balm being in the name is critical to understand that this may be for drier leathers and not all-purpose leather use. Chamberlain's does have a more liquid or creamy leather milk that I haven't tried. I probably should have gotten that one for the video now that I reflect back on it. Next with 8 points is Leather Therapy, and I already told you what I think about that one. Then with 7 points, there's Skidmore's, and these guys are just north of me in Washington, so I wish they had ranked higher. By the way, most of the products that I'm showing you are made in USA. I think there are only about 3 that I couldn't find information on. But I have all that in that document you can download in a minute. So Skidmore's, this was another one that was kind of thick. It darkened the leather some. There was nothing wrong with it. I just feel like some of the other products worked better for our handbag purposes. Coming in with 5 points is Black Rock Leather Enrich. And I already told you what I think about that one. And coming in with 4 points out of 20 is Leather Honey's Leather Conditioner. I think where this product lost the most points is because it took more product as compared to others. to get an even coat across the leather, it also darkens the leather the most. And sometimes you want that. So again, the results could be skewed based on your preferences. So that's an overview of the results. And I know that was a ton of information, so here is how you can access that document I keep talking about that has all of this at one place that you can save on your computer or print out, and you can have all of this at your fingertips. So you can refer back to the score chart. This document will be available on my website as a digital download, so I won't send you anything. You would place the order and then you're able to download the whole thing as a PDF file. At the time I'm filming this, I'm still working on it. It's probably going to be something like 30 pages. It's going to be really long because I'm giving you very detailed information about everything we just went over and then some. And I'm doing that by category, so I'll do like the water spotting and have all 15 products categorized based on how well they did in that test. But then I would also take each individual product and do a separate page with all of the information, the water spotting, the darkening, the tackiness, everything for just that one product. So you can look up the information either way. I'll also include some information on how I did this study, links to the products. I'm also including photographs that were taken throughout different processes of filming this video, so you don't have to always refer back to the video to see the leather swatches and how well they performed. There will be some photos that have all 15 with the control, and then I'll also have individual photos with the swatch compared to the control next to the bottle of whatever the product is. I also have a list in there of all the claims that the brand makes about each particular product, as well as directions for each product. So if you wanted to go see which one's the easiest to use, which is the most complicated, you can figure it out right there. And I'll have information, whatever information I could find about the ingredients. Some people list those, a lot don't, but there's often at least a little bit of information about them. And where it's been mentioned, it'll have information about what kinds of leathers to not use these products on, which are usually things like suede and nubuck. So all of that and more in this document. I am asking a small fee for it, but if you are interested in this information, you can afford it. I'm pretty sure it's a very, very small fee in exchange for all the time and money that I have spent doing this. It was about $200 to purchase all these products in the vachetta, not to mention all the time. And no one asked me to do this, so if I earn none of that money back, that's fine. It's totally on me. But I do feel like it's fair to ask for a small fee for all this information. And I hope that that was helpful for you. I had fun and I learned a lot, and I hope you did too. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Hope to see you back here next time, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye.